When most of us are anxious about a work or a partner not responding, we think it's the partner not responding, but what it really is a sense of invalidation or rejection we felt when mom showed up 3.5 hours late to pick me up from school and I was left all alone by myself. So what we're thinking it is not necessarily what it actually is and stored inside attached to our nervous system. Now, the next question comes in as you ask, well, then, yeah, it's when did they actually experience that feeling and stored through their nervous system? Most people, and this is what's so unfortunate, and it is predominantly a condition affected in individualistic societies. So in the field of psychology, when you study sociology as the human race, we have two societies, collectivistic and individualistic. Collectivistic are communities like Mexico, India, Thailand, Africa, spaces where community is valued. Individualistic countries are countries where the individual is valued. And so, places like North America, Scandinavia, it ends up being colder countries where people work for themselves. The economy is much better. People make much more money. And yet the levels of anxiety, they are infinitely higher than they are in collectivistic countries, because there they have a sense of communal support right from a really young age. Now, these children who have hyper dysregulated systems with suffering from social anxiety, any of those, all of them have dysregulated nervous systems. A lot of them have inherited those dysregulated nervous systems from traumatized parents. A lot of those children are children who, while they were in the womb of the parent was extremely dysregulated or was just processing health, like stress hormones running through their body, perhaps may have used chemicals, drugs, stimulants, any of those things, or been in a stressful environment themselves. A lot of parents a lot of mothers especially, whose partners had left them or abandoned them while they were rearing a child, end up with children or like having children who feel so unsafe that their nervous systems are perpetually dysregulated. Social anxiety is the fear of intermingling with someone else because it's the anxiety that the situation will not work out in your favor. Someone's going to either bully you, abuse you, reject you, invalidate you, or humiliate you, any of those things. So again, it comes back to the same thing, which is a lack of safety. Now, for example, when I was in my mom's womb, she carried me for 9 months, and I shared this on the gauntlet, but I'm not going to dive deep, but she went through a very traumatized time. Now, you as a little baby, imagine this. You have no choice about getting your nutrition from elsewhere. You have no choice about getting your feedback from elsewhere. It all comes from your mother's system. And how your mother feels comes from her environment or how she's feeling with other people involved, right? So at the end of the day, this little baby is absorbing trauma before it's even been born because it's feeding off of the stress hormones running through the mother's body. If the stress hormones are not even good for the mother who's an adult, imagine a little being who's creating a nervous system, who's growing this little flower or this little fruit of a nervous system, whilst it's constantly being flooded and attacked with this poison. What do you think that's going to do to a little being who's developing? It's going to fuck them up, quote unquote. When I was born, I had epilepsy, which I've never had again, touch wood, apart from like the first couple of years of my life. And so my nervous system was so fried that anything that was too spontaneous for me or was like too bright or too like whatever or shocking, my body would freak out. And that's because my nervous system, my brain was so fried with all the stress hormones, it would like react drastically. From then I moved on to a stage where I was diagnosed with ADHD, a hyperactive disorder. All of this stuff. And so I was put into different sports and whatever else. When I started doing this work and this research, I realized all of this was the sign of a dysregulated nervous system. Now, it is therefore my responsibility, you asked about medication. It is my responsibility to choose at that point, where can I get the best support authentically for myself that can help me regulate my nervous system? For a lot of people at the start, maybe that is medication because they feel safer with it. For me, and from what I teach, it's not that I'm against medication, but for me, medication just perpetuates the problem because you're providing more chemical substances into the brain to tell the nervous system that, hey, you need me to feel grounded. So what happens when you run out of medication? What happens if you can't get to a clinic? The nervous system can't survive on its own. So instead, and this is what they do in the East, in India especially, when I was growing up, there was no concept of anxiety medication. It was all, we had yoga in school, we had breath work and meditations that people would teach because that was their system of how they would create a safer and more regulated nervous system. And I can tell you with pride, actually, I've had people come onto the gauntlet who've been on suicide watch. I've had people who come into the gauntlet who've been on massive anxiety depression medication, and all of them, by learning to regulate their nervous systems as a discipline continuously, have been able to take themselves off of it. But it requires the discipline to be able to do it, and that's tough. But it starts slow and it grows so much so that now you regulate your own nervous system instead of your medication regulating your own nervous system. And that's ultimately how you can work through that. A lot of those children, the reason why anxiety is also so prevalent in individual countries, individualistic versus collectivistic, is because the social support is so minimal, that for a child, you've heard this concept, it takes a village to raise a child, right? It takes a village, it takes a safe community, and it takes a good group of friends for the child to ultimately feel that level of safety. But if you're in a world where children are competing so heavily against each other for survival, come back home to emotionally unavailable parents, don't have a close community of cousins, friends, or grandparents, or anybody around, this child now is left to sort their own problems. But a child is not born with the ability to sort their own problems. So now they start internalizing those problems. And those problems get attached to the nervous system. In a collectivistic place, whilst money may not be the area where they thrive, economies may be very poor, corruption may have been higher, this area, at least, of depression is lower because there's strong community support for this child. And the village is actually available to take care of this child and support it. So that's how the nervous system can actually be regulated by multiple, like different things.
Hey, and welcome to the Inner Yats YouTube page. If you like our content, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button so that you get more of these amazing videos that keep coming your way.